Hello, everybody. Welcome. We have come to the time and place for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District #1 meeting of June 10th, 2025. Clerk, please call the roll.
Halliburton, Stead,
Here.
Strasser,
Here.
2 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. First up on the agenda, we have the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes from the March 4th, 2025 meeting.
Thank you. I will second that. Is there any discussion? Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Stead,
Yes.
Strasser,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
We're small but mighty today. Okay, next up we have an update from staff. I think, David, you are going to give us a presentation on district updates.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, it's good to see all of you. Unfortunately, I apologize that I was not able to attend in person, but by way of introduction, my name is David Hasegawa, and I am the district treasurer. Can you all see the presentation all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, today is our budget workshop, and in today's workshop, I will be presenting the Harris Ranch CID's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget and seek guidance from the board on what should be presented at the public hearing that will be held in July. However, before we do that, I wanted to share a couple of updates for the district. So the first update is that we had an IRS audit and we passed it. And so on May 16th of last year, the IRS opened an examination of our 2015A and 2015B general obligation bonds. And the questions that the IRS sent to us were, the written questions were pretty standard to what they ask when they are auditing a municipal bond issuance. However, when we headed into the actual interviews with the IRS agents, they started asking questions that were remarkably similar to the questions that have been raised by the Harris Ranch CID Taxpayers Associations, both in their letters and in court. And so those included questions about how the votes were done, why the boundaries were set up the way they were, and how the reimbursement mechanisms were conducted, all of which are part of state code, and we follow that state code. And so over the next 6 months, staff provided thousands of pages of documentation and spent many hours meeting with the IRS as well as bond counsel and tax counsel. And I want to give a big thanks to Zach Taylor and to John McDevitt for doing a huge amount of the heavy lifting in this audit. And so in conclusion, I'm pleased to share that we successfully passed the audit. And although we are still pending a Supreme Court decision on the first litigation, it's encouraging to have a third party, and in this case, a federal agency, clear our practices around this bond issuance. So that is the first update. Any questions or comments before I head to the second?
No, not at this time, David. Thank you.
All right. The second update that I wanted to go over is I understand that a letter has been circulated throughout the Harris Ranch neighborhood claiming that either City Council or the District Board intend on taking action to raise the bond authorization from its existing $50 million to $100 million. And so because this letter has been causing some alarm, I wanted to publicly discuss two things: the direction of the district, as well as dispel the rumor that City Council or the District Board acting on their own could increase the size of a bond authorization. So first, the direction of the district. District staff have not been asked by the board, the City of Boise, or the developer to take any action to raise the bond authorization, nor are district staff researching or pursuing such an action. So that's the first thing. The second is that if a bond authorization were to occur, an increase to the bond authorization that is, it would require a supermajority of voters within the district. So that is all of the residents, those who are eligible to vote within the district, a supermajority would actually have to approve that. So City Council and the District Board do not have the power in themselves to increase the bond authorization. So I just hope that clears the air a little bit around some of the rumors that are going around the district. Any questions?
Thank you, David. That's really frustrating that letter went out with so much misinformation, and no wonder residents would be confused, but happy to hear, and hopefully they are too, that they would ultimately be the ones that would have to approve that kind of an increase. So they certainly don't need to expect that at all from us as our direction at this point. I appreciate that update. Any questions, Commissioner Strasser?
Would it be okay if I share some thoughts about the
Please.
letter?
Yeah, please.
So for the sake of anybody watching who doesn't know me, I'm a resident of the district, so I pay the district taxes. About a quarter of my property taxes go to CID, which is great because that means a quarter of my property taxes go right back into my neighborhood. But that means I also get these letters in the mail, and they're creative, and they have things like this in them which mislead people, and they're always asking for money. And so while I'm not going to donate money to something that I don't think is morally right, like litigating your way out of your promises and screwing your neighbors, I was thinking about what the Taxpayers Association has done for me to make them feel like they deserve my money. And so here's what I came up with. They've increased my overall tax burden in two ways. And you might say, well, how can they do that? Well, they can do that in two ways. The first is they're delaying the issuance of bonds. When they started this court case, the bond market was great. It's like almost free money. You can got low interest rates, great terms. Now, 4 years later, the bond market is not as great. We actually had to change the bond terms that were authorized at our last meeting. So borrowing the same amount of money now costs more. And that means that I'm going to pay CID taxes for longer, which means I'm going to pay more overall. And the second way they did that is by delaying the construction of the town center. So our taxes are based on the amount of, on the value of the taxable properties in the district. Town center is going to be pretty valuable once it's built. They're going to pay CID taxes, whoever owns those properties. And by not having those built yet, that means we're not collecting taxes from those properties, which again extends the amount of time we're all going to pay taxes. So what has the Taxpayers Association done for me? They've increased the amount of money I'm going to pay into the CID. And also, I know we've discussed this several times, they've reduced the amount of stuff we're going to get for that money. So instead of getting, I don't know, a park or whatever it might be, we're going to pay about $5 million of interest that we wouldn't have had to pay out of our $50 million of authorized spending. And then we're also going to have less value for our money for the construction coming out of the CID. So based on the 4 years of time and the construction inflation specifically in that amount of time, it's about another $5 million in value that we've lost. So if you're keeping track, that's $10 million less stuff you're going to get for spending more money as a result of the Taxpayers Association. So that's what they've done for me, and that's why I'm not giving them my money, but I just wanted to share that. It keeps me up at night.
I really appreciate that perspective, Commissioner. Thank you so much for sharing that. David, are you ready to go on to the next presentation? Okay, great. Yes, it looks like yes. So this is our budget workshop presentation. Back over to you. Thank you, David.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the 2026 budget follows a similar format as previous budgets for the Harris Ranch CID. Revenues and expenditures are divided out into three categories. And so you can see those columns A for administration, columns B and C are for general obligation bonds, and then column D is the special assessment bond, with column E being the total budget. And so we'll touch briefly on each of these different areas in the presentation. Now, one thing that's important to note is that the administration is small at about 23,000 compared to what you see in column C. And so the majority of the budget for the Harris Ranch CID is designed to do financing. And so that's why you see that the majority of the revenues that are highlighted here and the expenditures are for the use of community infrastructure financing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide and how this budget compares to prior years. And so a notable change is that the taxable value of the district has gone up, and I'll cover that in a later slide. But what this means is it creates additional revenue that the district is able to use. And in fact, that revenue, incremental revenue, is sufficient to support a $17.5 million bond. Now, that presumes that a legal path does open up. Yesterday, oral arguments were held before the Idaho Supreme Court, and we are optimistic that a forthcoming ruling will open up a path for the district to be able to issue bonds. The district has not issued any bonds since the 2020 bond, and so that means that the incremental revenue that's available has built up to the point where you have a fairly sizable bond issuance relative to the district that is possible to be supported. So that's that 17.5 million. And then the other area that I wanted to call attention to is that 8.7 million. $5 million is in there, which may or may not show up as revenue for the district based on whether or not a couple of things occur. One is if interest rates come down, we would actually be able to have a larger bond issuance. And then the second thing is that if a bond buyer were to offer terms of 15 years or 20 years or more than that, then we would be able to support a larger bond as well. So that $5 million is in there as really as contingent appropriation. So in the city budget, contingent appropriation is really there for things that might roll over from one year to the other. In the case of the Harris Ranch CID, that contingent appropriation is there in case the bond structure itself changes and we have the opportunity to issue a larger bond. Additionally, I'll touch more on the 3.7 million for the special assessment. That's what the SA stands for, refinance. But really, the fact that we have a $29 million budget compared to about a $21 or so million budget, that larger size is because of more incremental revenue as well as building in some capacity for flexibility. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
We're good for now. Thanks, David.
Okay. So the administrative levy, as I mentioned, the actual levy itself is relatively small, that $23,000, but we do have budgeted in the ability to receive additional advances from the city of Boise should it become necessary, and also the ability or the budgetary authority to expend that revenue in case there are continued legal costs that persist into fiscal 2026. And so I think the key word for this year's budget is flexibility. It is not necessarily true that we would receive those revenues. Those would only be called upon if they became necessary. So let me pause there and see if there's any questions.
Not at this time. Thanks, David.
Okay. Then the general obligation bond, as we've mentioned before in prior meetings, the purpose of the Harris Ranch CID is to finance the construction of community infrastructure in advance of the actual growth, so that the infrastructure is able to support all of the growth that does occur within the district. And so what you see here is that the existing debt service for the district in column B is $822,000. And we have a total of $2.6 million that we expect to receive. And one important note here I should call out is that this is based on Ada County's current estimate of the taxable value of the district. They do change that slightly, so you can expect that some of the numbers may shift slightly by the time we hit the July public meeting, the July public hearing. But right now we expect that about $1.7 million of incremental revenue is going to be available, which with rates where they are should support about a $17.5 million bond. All right. Any questions before I move on? I apologize. I keep asking this over and over again since I'm not in the room.
No, you're good. Please continue.
Okay. All right. Then the last category of revenue that the district receives is the special assessment. Special assessments differ from levies in that they are not based on the taxable value of your house. Instead, they are based on the acreage of the property that you own. So a fixed levy amount, that 401,000, is assessed, and that is spread out based on the size of your property. So the larger the physical size of your property, the larger the share that you pay for that. Now that revenue goes to pay for a special assessment bond that was taken out in 2011, and the rates are quite high on that. They're about 9%, and we would like to be able to refinance that, but the specific challenge right now is that the lenders that we've contacted have not been interested in doing so while there is litigation. And so we do not know if we will be able to get a refinance in this fiscal year, but we have created the budgetary capacity to be able to accomplish that refinance should the opportunity avail itself. And so that's where you see that $3.7 million that was referenced earlier a couple slides ago. All right. If no questions, then I'll move on and let's talk about some of the dynamics of where we are in terms of two areas: the taxable value of the district as a whole, that's that first chart in the upper left, and then the taxable value of the average home within the district, and then finally how those two dynamics influence the actual property taxes. So the district's overall taxable value rose 16% up to $892 million. Again, this is Ada County's current estimate. And that increase is a combination of the appreciation in home values, meaning the value of your value of your house goes up and all of your neighbors go up, then the value of the district increases. But it's also driven by about $44 million in new construction within the district. And that is in contrast to the average home value. And so that was that 16% increase. The average home value increased by about 9% since last year. And that 9% increase equals to about 843,000. So keep in mind, this is just an average of all of the homes in the district. Some homes are worth more, some are worth less. And so when I talk about the average homeowner, I'm speaking about someone who happens to have a home that is 843,000. And so some of the actual numbers the actual numbers for taxes are based on that 843,000. And so where this is important is where it leads to in that final chart at the bottom for property taxes. That final chart shows that what we would expect is that the average home would end up paying around $2,070 in Harris Ranch CID taxes, which is about an 11% increase. And the reason you have a difference between that 11% and the 9% increase is that although the average value rose to 843,000, you have to then subtract out the homeowner's exemption. And so that smaller value leads to a slight difference in percentages. So the bottom line, the message here though, is that we are seeing a dynamic that we want to see, which is not what occurred in 2022. And that dynamic is that the taxable value of the district is going up due to new construction, more so than just simply the appreciation of homes. And in 2022, we had that dynamic where home values rose tremendously, and you can see that 35% increase, and that led to a huge overall increase in CID taxes. So here we have a much healthier dynamic, which means that the overall taxes for that average homeowner are not going to be quite as high. So let me pause there. I threw a whole bunch of concepts together, and so I'd be happy to provide any clarification.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think that you've done an excellent job with a very comprehensive presentation. So we are following along just fine. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. So this is the last slide before we set you free for the day. The district has historically taken the full general obligation bond levy. So the 2.85 mils, which equals 0.285%. And so if the district were to take that full amount, what you would see is incremental revenues of about $1.7 million, leading to a bond issuance, an estimated bond issuance of $17.5 million. However, the district board has the authority to set something less than the full amount. And so in the example here, the partial levy represents the inclusion of only the new construction. And so what that would do is that you would largely see that homeowners' taxes would not change. Now, keep in mind, the value of homes does not change uniformly throughout the district. So some homeowners would still see an increase and others might see a decrease based on the value of their home. But 1,860 is about what you had last year. And so I show that just simply because I want to demonstrate there are other paths forward. However, that being said, staff's presumed direction is to take the full levy amount. And the reason is that this best positions the district to be able to catch up on the financing that will allow for the full build out of community infrastructure. As Board Member Strasser indicated, at this time, we are continuing to build up the amount of accrued interest, or the amount of the bond authorization that's going to be used for accrued interest instead of being used for actual infrastructure. And so thus that has been staff's approach, that has been the approach of the district, but I would like to understand two things. One, if the board would like to see any other scenarios as we head into the budget public hearing, or if the board would like to affirm the direction that we're taking, that staff present the budget with a full levy. So I welcome your and would love to hear your direction.
Thanks, David. Commissioner, would you like to kick it off?
Madam Chair, David, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very thorough, and I think perhaps for residents who watch this at a later time, hopefully increases the understanding of the way the taxes work and the way that the taxable value of the district contributes to the amount of taxes we can collect. My perspective on whether we should take the full levy or the partial levy is that we should certainly take the full levy because of the situation we're in with so many approved projects and unbonded, basically debt that we owe. So I'd like to get rid of the interest accruing to the developer and then bond the rest of those out to stop additional interest from accruing and kind of catch up to where you'd hope we would be at this point in the CID's lifespan instead of where we are right now.
Thank you. David, I agree. I'm going to support the full levy direction. We have so many, our hands are tied on a lot of things right now. And I think that we need to do the best that we can to stay as nimble as we can in the constraints that we have, so that we can take action as appropriate when we're able to. I've also seen the kind of cumulative impacts that, that I guess lightening up can have on the budget. I've seen that on the city side with the city budget on how that compounds year after year. We have few funding mechanisms, and I think it's important that we stay funded as best we can at this point until we kind of know for sure what's coming next over the next year or two. So I appreciate the presentation, and I think that's probably given you the direction that you need to prepare for next month's meeting. Is there anything else before we wrap up from you, David?
Madam Chair, no, that is it. So unless there's anything else you would like to see prepared for the budget public hearing, then that's it for today from me.
Thank you. I think the only, I'd love to hear a litigation update if we have anything that we can share publicly by the time the next meeting comes. I know certainly we don't have any information at this point, but looking forward to resolving that, and we'll look for an update in the next meeting. And I think with that, thank you again, David, but I think with that, I could take a motion to adjourn.
All right, and if you don't mind, one more
Please,
thing,
go ahead, Commissioner.
for anybody who's watching this from the district, if you want to go watch the oral arguments, they're available online. You can just probably Google it and find the link. I don't have it with me right now, but it's worth watching if you're interested in what's happening with the CID litigation.
Yeah, and Madam Chair.
Yeah, please.
What I would add is that anyone who is interested in receiving that link can email Boise Treasury, one word, at cityofboise.org, and to Board Member Strasser's point, we'd be happy to share that link. So anyone who wants to
Great.
watch the oral arguments that were held before the Idaho Supreme Court yesterday, we'd be happy to share that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I can take a motion to adjourn
All
if
right.
you'd like, if you're ready
Madam
for
Chair, I
it.
move that we adjourn.
Okay, I will second that. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David.